The old rotary phone on the nightstand buzzed to life, jolting Rachel out of her half-asleep state. She squinted at the digital clock glowing red numbers, 3 a.m. Her heart thumped in her chest like it was trying to escape. Rachel had a strict rule about ignoring calls in the dead of night, but the incessant ringing felt like a siren's call. She reached over, her hand trembling, and picked up the receiver. "Hello," she murmured, voice thick with sleep. The line crackled in response, and Rachel felt a cold shiver run down her spine. It wasn't the usual static, it was something alive. "Is anyone there?" she asked, her voice a little louder this time, trying to shake off the eerie feeling. A deep, guttural voice emerged from the other end, so distorted it barely sounded human. Rachel's blood turned to ice as she realized the voice was speaking in a language she'd never heard before, but somehow, she understood every word. "Your soul is marked," it growled. Rachel's hand tightened around the phone, knuckles white. "What do you want?" Rachel demanded, trying to keep the fear from seeping into her voice. The line went silent for a beat, and then the voice spoke again, the tone now eerily calm. "You will be mine," it said, and then the call ended with a deafening screech. Rachel threw the phone across the room, the plastic clattering against the wall before it fell to the floor. The room remained still, the silence thick and suffocating. Her heart hammered in her ears as Rachel sat up in bed, the covers clutched to her chest. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It had to be a prank, a terrible, sick joke. But something deep within her knew that wasn't the case. The phone call had felt real. Too real. Rachel's eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of the malevolent presence she felt lurking just out of sight. The shadows danced in the moonlight, but she knew better than to trust her own eyes. The call had been a warning, a promise of darkness to come. Rachel could feel the demonic connection tugging at her, drawing her into a nightmare she never wanted to enter. With shaking hands, Rachel reached for the phone, her thumb hovering over the button to call the police. But she hesitated. What would she say? That a demon had called her? That she understood a language that shouldn't exist? They'd think she was insane. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Instead, she decided to call her best friend, Laura. Laura had always been the one to listen, the one to believe in the unbelievable. The phone rang once, twice, and then Laura's groggy voice answered. Rachel quickly recounted the chilling conversation, her voice trembling with every word. Laura's sleepiness turned to concern, and Rachel felt a little less alone. "You should come over," Laura said, her voice clear despite the early hour. "You shouldn't be by yourself right now," Rachel agreed, throwing on some clothes and grabbing her keys. She didn't bother to check the locks. She knew they wouldn't keep whatever was after her out. As she rushed to her car, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the echoes of the demon's voice. Rachel's breath fogged in the chilly night air, and she shivered, not from the cold, but from the fear that clung to her like a second skin. The drive to Laura's house was a blur, Rachel's eyes fixed on the road ahead. She didn't dare glance at the rearview mirror, not wanting to see if anything followed her. Laura's house was a beacon of warmth and light in the otherwise dark neighborhood. Rachel bolted up the steps and into the safety of her friend's arms. As Laura brewed tea in the kitchen, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting. They talked in hushed tones, trying to piece together what the call could mean. Laura suggested a priest, an exorcism, anything to break the connection. But Rachel knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The demon had found her, and it wasn't going to let go without a fight. "You've got the last one?" the realtor asked, flipping through the keys with a practiced ease. "Yep, 3B, the young couple nodded in unison, their eyes wide with hope and a hint of apprehension. The hallway was eerily silent, the floorboards creaking with each step as they made their way down the dimly lit corridor. The air was stale, carrying whispers of forgotten lives and secrets long held within these walls. The apartment complex was old, the kind that had seen better days, but had an undeniable charm that drew people in despite its age. "It's a steal at this price," the realtor said, her voice echoing off the peeling wallpaper. "Just needs a bit of TLC." The door to 3B looked as though it hadn't been open in years. A thick layer of dust clung to the knob and frame, creating a stark contrast against the worn-out carpet. The couple exchanged a look, a mix of excitement and doubt playing across their faces. This was their chance to finally own a place in the city, but something about it felt off. With a gentle push, the door gave way, revealing a space frozen in time. Faded curtains, yellowed by the sun, hung lifelessly over the windows, allowing shafts of dusty light to pierce the darkness. The furniture was arranged in a way that suggested the last tenant had left in a hurry, leaving a half-eaten meal on the table and an open book on the chair. The room was a puzzle of shadows and memories, and as the realtor flipped on the lights, the dust danced in the air, revealing a home that had been abandoned but not empty of life. The couple stepped inside, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust that coated everything. They could almost feel the weight of the secrets that lurked within these four walls, secrets that had been left behind by the last person who called this place home. The silence was palpable, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover what had been left untouched. As they moved through the space, their eyes fell upon small, personal items scattered here and there, a single sock under the bed, a collection of keys on a dusty nightstand, a photograph that had slipped from its frame. The realtor talked on about potential renovations and the building's history, but the young wife found herself drawn to these relics of the past. They whispered of a story she hadn't been told, one that she felt compelled to unravel. Her husband, more practical, was busy inspecting the condition of the appliances and the sturdiness of the walls. "It's got good bones," he murmured, knocking on the kitchen cabinets. Yet he too couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. A subtle tension hung in the air, a tension that grew with every step they took into the bowels of the apartment. The last room they visited was a small study, its door slightly ajar. As the wife pushed it open, she gasped. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, each packed with books that looked as if they hadn't been touched in decades. A dusty desk sat in the center of the room, a fountain pen resting atop a leather-bound journal. The scent of aged paper filled the air, a scent she found oddly comforting amidst the oppressive silence. Her gaze was drawn to the single book that lay open on the desk, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting was spidery, almost illegible, but she could make out a date from the corner of the page, August 13, 1978. The last entry. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she read the words scribbled hastily across the page. "They're watching. I can't stay here anymore." A chill danced across her skin as the realization hit her the last tenant had left abruptly, leaving everything behind, including their deepest, darkest secrets. Her husband looked over her shoulder, curiosity piqued. "What's it say?" he asked, his voice low. "It's strange," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It sounds like they were scared of something." The realtor, sensing their unease, bustled in, a forced smile on her face. "Ah, the study, a perfect spot for a home office, don't you think?" she said, her voice too bright for the room's somber atmosphere. But the words on the page haunted them, whispering of a hidden truth. As the tour concluded, and they stepped out into the hallway, the young wife couldn't help but glance back, the open journal seeming to call out to her. The apartment's allure had shifted from charming to eerie, and she wondered if they were ready to live with the ghosts of the past. "Well, what do you think?" the realtor asked, her smile hopeful. The husband, still processing the room's disturbing aura, took his wife's hand. "We'll have to think about it," he said, his voice filled with uncertainty. The wife nodded, her eyes lingering on the study's door. They had found an apartment with secrets, and now she couldn't help but feel that those secrets had found her too. That night, as they lay in bed discussing the apartment's potential, she couldn't shake the image of the journal from her mind. The words, "They're watching," echoed through her thoughts, sending a cold chill down her spine. Despite her husband's reassurances, she found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with questions about the last tenant's hasty departure. Days turned into weeks, and the couple's decision hung in the balance. The more they thought about the apartment, the more the whispers of its past grew louder, beckoning them to uncover the truth. They decided to take the plunge, driven by curiosity and the irresistible allure of a good mystery. Once they had moved in, the wife made the study her own, placing her laptop on the dusty desk and the open journal to the side. She had an inexplicable urge to understand the story behind those final words. As she sat down to work, she couldn't help but feel the presence of the former tenant, as if their spirit was still trapped within the pages of that book. Her research began with the building's archives, digging through old newspaper clippings and tenant records. The more she dug, the more she discovered a pattern of strange occurrences in the building, unexplained noises, objects moving, and even reports of shadowy figures. The last tenant's name was Marvin, a man who had lived a reclusive life, shunning the company of others. His only known family was a sister, who had passed away years before he disappeared. The journal entries grew more frantic as the dates approached August 13, 1978. Marvin spoke of being watched, of hearing whispers in the night, and seeing things that no one else could. His paranoia had escalated to the point of madness, his entries a tangled web of fear and confusion. The wife felt a pang of pity for the man whose life had unraveled in the very room she now occupied. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room into a soft, amber glow, she heard it, a faint whisper, so soft it could have been the rustling of leaves. She froze, her heart racing, and listened. The whisper grew louder, clearer, and she realized with a start that it was the sound of her own name being called. Her husband was out for the night, and she was alone with the echoes of the past. She stood, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked slowly towards the bookshelf. Her hand trembled as she reached for the journal, her eyes scanning the last entry once more. The ink had smudged slightly, but she could still make out the words, "They're coming for me tonight." The whispers grew louder, surrounding her, and she knew that the secret of 3B was far from over. The apartment had become more than just their new home. It was now a puzzle they needed to solve, a mystery they had to unravel if they were ever to find peace within its walls. The wife's curiosity grew into an obsession, consuming her every waking moment. She combed through the journal's pages, deciphering Marvin's feverish scribbles, searching for clues to explain his descent into paranoia. The more she read, the more she felt the weight of his fear pressing down on her. The whispers grew more frequent, more urgent, and she began to feel as though she was being watched. One day, while her husband was at work, she found an old newspaper article hidden between the pages of a book titled "The Supernatural in the Urban Jungle." It spoke of a series of unsolved disappearances in the area, all occurring on the night of a full moon. The victims were described as solitary individuals, much like Marvin, who had reported seeing and hearing things that didn't exist. Her heart pounded as she read the chilling words that seemed to connect the dots of the past to their present. That night, unable to ignore the persistent whispers, she decided to confront the presence in the study. With the journal in hand, she sat at the desk, her heart racing as she called out to Marvin's spirit. The room grew colder, and the whispers grew to a crescendo, until she heard his voice, clear as day, "You must leave before it's too late." A chilling breeze swept through the room, and she knew they had disturbed something that was never meant to be found. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. They had moved into a place where reality blurred with the supernatural, The apartment's charm had been a siren's call, luring them into a world of secrets and fear. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and she felt a presence moving closer. Her eyes darted to the calendar on the wall, and she gasped. Tonight was a full moon, the same night that Marvin had vanished. Her hand tightened around the journal, the ink on the pages seemingly pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, each one begging her to leave, to save herself. Her mind racing, she knew they couldn't stay in 3B. The secrets of the last tenant had become their own, and the price for uncovering them might be too high. The room grew colder still, the whispers now a scream, and she felt the pressure of invisible eyes upon her. Gathering her strength, she called out, "We're leaving, Marvin, tell them we're going." The air in the room stilled, the whispers fading to an eerie silence. She took it as a sign, a brief reprieve, and quickly packed her bag. When her husband returned home, she told him everything. His eyes wide with shock, he gathered her into his arms, and together they made the difficult decision to leave. They didn't know what awaited them outside, but the chilling embrace of the apartment had become too much to bear. The next day, as they stood in the empty study, the whispers grew faint, as if bidding them a reluctant farewell. They knew they couldn't take the journal with them, not without inviting whatever malevolent force had attached itself to it into their new lives. With a heavy heart, she placed it back on the desk, the final page open to the last entry, a silent plea to the next unsuspecting souls who dared to call 3B home. The door clicked shut behind them, and the whispers grew silent once more. The secrets of 3B remained, trapped within the walls, waiting for the next tenant to discover the chilling truth that had driven them away. As the young couple stepped into the brisk night air, they felt a collective sigh of relief. The apartment's oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and they could finally breathe freely. They didn't speak of the journal or the whispers again, the memory a shared burden that bound them together in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Life moved on, and the apartment remained vacant for months. The realtor grew concerned, the secret of 3B weighing heavily on her mind. She had seen many tenants come and go over the years, but the disappearance of Marvin and the subsequent flight of the young couple had left an indelible mark. One evening, under the light of another full moon, she decided to confront the building's manager, a stoic man who had worked there for as long as anyone could remember. His office was cluttered with paperwork and old photographs, a stark contrast to the cold digital efficiency of the real world outside. "There's something wrong with 3B, she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's not just the building's history, there's something more." The manager looked up from his desk, his eyes dark and knowing. "Marvin," he murmured, stroking his chin. "I knew he wasn't right in the head, but I never thought it would come to this." He revealed that Marvin had been obsessed with the supernatural, that he had conducted strange experiments and rituals within the confines of his study, hoping to harness a power that he could never truly understand. The whispers, the shadows, the cold spots, they were all remnants of his madness, seeped into the very fabric of the room. The realtor's eyes grew wide as she realized that she had been complicit in keeping the apartment's dark past a secret. She had shown countless people the space, each time feeling the same unease that had driven the young couple to leave. Together, they decided to confront the building's owner, a reclusive woman who lived in the penthouse suite. She listened to their story, her expression unreadable, and finally nodded. "I knew this day would come," she said, her voice low and gravelly. "Marvin's obsession consumed him. I had hoped it would end with him." They made a pact to renovate the apartment, to cleanse it of its dark past. The walls were torn down, the floorboards replaced, and the bookshelves removed. The study was transformed into a bright, welcoming space, devoid of its former gloom. Yet the whispers remained, a faint echo of a story that had yet to reach its conclusion. The young couple found a new apartment, one with no secrets, no whispers, and a view of the bustling city below. They tried to put the events of 3B behind them, but the experience had changed them, leaving them with an insatiable curiosity for the unknown. They often wondered about Marvin, about the things he had seen and heard, and whether he had ever truly found peace. Years later, they would tell their children the story of the apartment they had almost called home, the place where they had brushed against the veil that separated the living from the dead. And in the quiet moments of the night, when the moon was full, they would listen, hoping that somewhere in the darkness, Marvin had found a way to be free. The building's secrets had been buried beneath layers of paint and plaster, but the whispers remained, a haunting reminder of the last tenant's desperate plea for help. The realtor, now a wise woman with a few gray hairs, would occasionally glance up at the third floor, her thoughts drifting to the room where the young wife had once sat, her heart racing as she unraveled the threads of a mystery that would never truly be solved. Mrs. Jenkins shuffled over, her eyes gleaming. "The mirror is a door, child. You must find the key to unlock it, but beware," she warned. "Once you enter, you may not find your way back." The antique shop sat in a quiet corner of town, nestled between a dusty bookstore and a forgotten cafe. Its window display was a jumble of peculiarities: a chipped porcelain doll with a missing eye, a silver locket that seemed to contain a tiny universe, and a dust-covered mirror that had seen better days. The mirror's frame was gilded, but the gold had faded to a mournful gray. It was the kind of place where secrets gathered dust alongside forgotten knickknacks. Mrs. Jenkins, the shop's ancient proprietor, had a knack for finding the oddest of items. She had a story for every piece she sold, but her favorite was the one she kept hidden in the back, under a velvet cloth. It was a mirror, she claimed, with the power to show you your deepest, most hidden self. Most people bought it as a quirky decoration, but a few returned with tales of eerie whispers and unexplained reflections that lingered long after they left the room. One rainy afternoon, a young girl named Leila stumbled into the shop, seeking shelter from the storm. She was drawn to the mirror immediately. Her eyes met her own reflection, and she saw a sadness that she hadn't noticed before. Mrs. Jenkins, noticing her fascination, offered a gentle smile. "Would you like to take a closer look, dear?" Leila nodded, her curiosity piqued. She approached the mirror and gazed into its murky depths. As the first droplets of rain hit the window pane, the glass began to shiver, and the reflection grew clearer. In the mirror's world, the shop faded away, replaced by a garden that seemed to stretch on forever. The girl reached out a tentative hand, and her reflection reached back. It was then that she heard the whisper, faint but insistent, "Help me." The voice was not her own. It was the echo of someone trapped, desperate, and lost. She jerked her hand away, her heart racing. Mrs. Jenkins looked up from her book with a knowing smile. "Ah, you've heard her. Not everyone does. She's been waiting a very long time." The mirror's surface rippled like a pond disturbed by a stone. A figure emerged from the shadows, a young woman dressed in tattered finery. Her eyes searched the room, finding Leila. The woman's reflection looked just like the girl herself, except for the sorrow etched on her face. "Please," she whispered again, "you're the only one who can free me." Leila felt a tug, a strange kinship with the figure in the mirror. She stepped closer, her hand hovering over the cold glass. "How?" she asked, her voice trembling. The rain outside grew heavier, the wind howling like a mournful wolf. The woman in the mirror grew clearer, more desperate. "Find the key," she pleaded, "before it's too late." The room grew colder, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying flowers. Leila could feel the presence of the woman, her sorrow pressing against the boundaries of the glass. She knew she had to help her, had to find the key to set her free. Mrs. Jenkins handed her an ancient map, the edges frayed and the ink faded. "This will guide you," she said, her voice low. "But remember, the mirror world is not like ours. It's a place of shadows and reflections, where truth is as elusive as a mirage." With a deep breath, Leela took the map and turned to face the mirror. The woman's reflection was so vivid she could almost touch her. "I'll come for you," she promised. "I'll find a way." And with that, she stepped through the glass. The sensation was unlike anything she'd ever felt. It was like passing through a veil of ice water, sharp and cold, leaving her gasping on the other side. The mirror's surface rippled and closed behind her, sealing her into the reflection world. The garden was not what she expected. It was a twisted place where the flowers had teeth and the paths led nowhere. The rain had ceased, but the air remained thick and oppressive, weighing down on her like a heavy blanket. Leela looked around, her eyes searching for any sign of the key, her heart pounding in her chest like a caged bird. The woman's reflection was gone, but the sadness lingered, a palpable presence that clung to her like a second skin. The map in her hand was as cryptic as the whispers that echoed through the garden. It was covered in symbols she didn't understand and lines that didn't match any geography she knew. But it was all she had to navigate the maze of thorny bushes and looming trees that seemed to lean in, watching her every move. As she ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder. They were not just the cries for help from the mirror woman anymore, but a cacophony of voices, all desperate and lost. The garden was a prison for more than one soul, it seemed. The path grew narrow, the thorns sharper, and the shadows deeper. Each step was a battle against doubt and fear, but Leela pressed on. The whispers grew clearer, forming words, then sentences, then a story. The story of a world split apart by a greedy queen who had stolen the heart of her own reflection to gain power over the mirror realm. The reflection people lived in fear, trapped in a world of endless rain, their true selves locked away in the very glass they used to peer into the human world. The key, Leela learned, was hidden in the Queen's castle, a place of twisted beauty and dark secrets. It was a quest that would test her courage, her wits, and her very essence. The whispers grew to a crescendo, guiding her towards the castle's gleaming spires that pierced the gloomy sky. The air grew colder, the ground more treacherous, but she could feel the warmth of the woman's hope pulling her forward. As she approached the castle gates, they swung open, seemingly of their own accord. The reflection people parted before her, their eyes filled with a mix of awe and fear. The castle was a reflection of a palace, but it was built of shadows and despair. In the heart of the castle, she found the Queen. Her eyes were mirrors themselves, swirling with the stolen reflections of 100 souls. She sat on a throne of glass, her crown a twisted tangle of thorns and silver. "Who dares enter my realm?" the Queen demanded, her voice a chilling blend of all the whispers Leela had heard. Leela stepped forward, the map clutched tightly in her hand. "I've come for the key," she said firmly. "To free the one you've trapped and to restore the balance." The Queen's laughter was a symphony of shattering glass. "You think you can best me, child," she sneered. "I've seen every trick, every hope, every failure that has ever been reflected in my glass." But Leela was not so easily deterred. She had felt the pain of the trapped souls, the desperation in their whispers. She knew that she had to try. The battle that followed was not one of swords or spells, but of reflections and wills. Leela's true self against the Queen's shadowy power. Each clash sent ripples through the mirror world, distorting the very fabric of the place. With a final push of strength, she flung the map at the Queen. The ancient paper unfolded into a blinding light that shattered the mirrors surrounding the throne. The Queen screamed as her power was torn from her, the stolen reflections breaking free. The room grew silent, the air thick with the dust of 1,000 shattered illusions. Leela felt a warm hand in hers, and she turned to see the woman from the mirror, now solid and real. Tears streamed down the woman. "You sure this is the right way?" Sam squinted through the dense foliage, the question lingering in the air like mist clinging to the leaves. "Yeah, the map's clear," Mark replied, his thumb tracing the faded lines on the worn parchment. "The last path of the forest is just up ahead." The two friends had been trekking through the wilderness for hours, the thick canopy of trees above them muffling any sign of civilization. Their boots crunched against the forest floor, a rhythmic pattern of dried leaves and twigs that seemed to echo their every step. The path they followed was barely discernible, a secret whisper of nature that had long ago been forgotten by the outside world. "Looks like no one's been here in a while," Sam observed, pushing aside a tangle of vines that had claimed the trail as their own. The forest grew eerily quiet, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, watching these two interlopers. A gentle breeze sighed through the branches, carrying the faint scent of something ancient and untouched. It was a scent that spoke of secrets and whispers of a time before man had laid claim to the land. The air grew thick with anticipation, each breath a silent promise of adventure. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, leaving the forest floor bathed in a soft, ethereal light. The shadows grew long, stretching out like fingers reaching for them, hinting at the hidden corners of the world that lay just out of sight. Mark looked up, his eyes following the intertwined branches that formed a cathedral ceiling over their heads. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sam nodded, her eyes reflecting the same awe. "Yeah, but it's also kind of intense." The path grew narrower, the trees pressing in closer, as if to guard the secrets that lay within. The silence was a living thing, a creature that watched and waited, and the two friends felt its weight upon their shoulders like a heavy cloak. They continued on, the path leading them deeper into the heart of the woods. The light grew dimmer, the shadows dancing around them like shy ghosts. "What do you think we'll find?" Sam asked, her voice a hushed murmur. Mark shrugged. "Could be anything, that's the beauty of it, right?" Their laughter, a sudden burst of sound, echoed through the trees and was quickly swallowed by the silence once more. They walked on, the last path of the forest unwinding before them like a ribbon, inviting them into a world untouched by time. The path grew steeper, the incline testing their legs as the air grew cooler. The trees around them grew taller, their trunks thick and gnarled, as if they had witnessed centuries of untold stories. The leaves above whispered secrets that only the wind understood. A clearing appeared, the path widening into a circular space bathed in the soft, dappled light of a setting sun. In the center stood a tree unlike any they had seen before, its branches a tapestry of twisted limbs that seemed to reach for the heavens. The tree's bark was etched with ancient symbols, the language of a lost civilization that spoke of a world where humans were but guests. The leaves, a deep emerald, shimmered with an unearthly glow, casting a soft luminescence across the clearing. At the base of the tree, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a creature that seemed to be born of the very fabric of the forest itself, part human, part tree, its limbs a blend of bark and skin, eyes like pools of ancient wisdom. It regarded them with curiosity, its gaze unblinking. Mark and Sam froze, unsure of what to do. The creature spoke in a voice that was both a whisper and a sigh. "You have found the last path of the forest. What do you seek?" Their hearts pounding in their chests, they looked at each other, then back at the creature. Mark stepped forward, the map trembling in his hand. "We're looking for the heart of the woods," he managed to say, the words barely audible. The creature's expression did not change, but its eyes seemed to bore into their very souls. "Your intentions must be pure," it warned, "for the heart is not for the greedy or the power-hungry." They swore that their intentions were true, driven by curiosity and respect for the natural world. The creature studied them a moment longer before it spoke again. "Very well, but know this, the heart is guarded by those who have devoted their lives to protecting it. They will not yield it easily." With a grace that belied its form, the creature melted back into the shadows, leaving them standing in the clearing with their hearts racing. They knew the adventure had just begun. The sun had fully set now, the clearing a pool of silver light in the darkening forest. The whispers of the leaves grew softer, and the air grew cooler. They camped for the night, the glowing leaves of the heart tree a comforting presence in the gloom. As they sat by the fire, sharing stories of their past and dreams of their future, they heard the faintest sound of laughter on the breeze. It was the laughter of the forest, welcoming them into its embrace, hinting at the magic and mystery that lay ahead. The next morning, they set out once more, the path now clear before them, leading them further into the heart of the woods. They knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were ready. After all, they had been granted the privilege of walking the last path of the forest, and nothing could deter them from finding the heart of the woods. The path grew steeper, twisting and turning through the ancient trees. The air grew thick, with the scent of moss and earth, a perfume that spoke of life untouched by human hands. As they climbed, they began to notice that the trees around them bore marks of respect, carvings and offerings from those who had come before. It was a sacred place, a sanctuary where the old ways still held sway. The sun had reached its zenith when they finally saw it, a gleaming speck of light piercing the dense canopy above. It grew larger as they approached, until they could see it clearly, a crystal-clear spring bubbling from the base of a hill. The water looked like liquid diamond, sparkling with an inner fire. They knelt by the spring, cupping their hands to drink. The water was cold, yet it filled them with warmth and energy, rejuvenating their weary spirits. They knew they were close. The heart of the woods had to be nearby. The laughter they had heard the night before grew louder, echoing through the trees like a chorus of invisible friends. It was a sound that seemed to come from all directions, yet remained elusive, as if teasing them to follow. They quickened their pace, the sound of the spring fading behind them as they were drawn deeper into the forest. The trees grew denser, the path all but swallowed by the underbrush. They pushed through, the laughter growing clearer, the light growing brighter. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The forest held its breath. They stumbled into a glade, the ground a carpet of vibrant moss, the air alive with the scent of blooming flowers. In the center stood a tree, not as tall as the one in the clearing, but its presence was undeniable. Its trunk was a swirl of colors, deep greens and vibrant blues, swirling into purples and reds, as if the very essence of the forest had been captured within its bark. The heart of the woods. They approached with reverence, the gravity of their quest weighing heavily upon them. The tree's branches bent down, creating a natural archway, beckoning them closer. As they passed beneath, the leaves rustled in greeting, whispering secrets of the ages. Within the embrace of the heart, they found a chamber, the walls lined with crystals that hummed with an ancient power. The air was electric, crackling with energy that seemed to pulse in time with their own heartbeats. In the center of the chamber, nestled within a bed of velvet moss, lay a stone, the heart of the woods itself. It was a simple stone, unassuming and small, yet it radiated a warmth that seemed to envelop them. They reached out, their fingertips brushing the cool surface, and felt a surge of connection to the earth beneath them. The laughter grew again, a crescendo of joy that filled the glade. Figures began to emerge from the trees, their forms shifting and changing as they drew nearer, half human, half plant, all spirit. The guardians of the heart had come to greet them, to judge their worthiness. They circled the chamber, their eyes alight with curiosity and a hint of challenge. Mark and Sam stood, their hands still on the stone, hearts pounding in their chests. They knew what was at stake, not just the prize of their quest, but the very essence of the forest's protection. The guardians approached, their eyes filled with the wisdom of the ages. They spoke in unison, their voices a harmony of whispers and rustling leaves. You have come far, travelers, but the heart of the woods is not for the taking. It is for those who wish to protect, to nurture, to be one with the land. The two friends looked at each other, understanding in their eyes. This was not a treasure to be claimed, but a bond to be forged. They pledged themselves to the forest, promising to be its stewards and protectors. The guardians nodded, satisfied. The heart of the woods glowed brighter, a beacon in the darkness. The forest sighed in relief, its spirits lifting in their presence. They had found what they sought, but the journey was far from over. The guardians spoke once more, their voices fading like the last notes of a lullaby. The heart is yours to keep, but remember, you are now bound to its fate. Protect it, cherish it,